All right. Testing, testing, testing sound. See Firesight in the house, as usual. Should be good to go, I think. All right. Welcome, everybody, to Can Hammer TV. It is a week before Christmas. Crazy to think. Vaccines have started rolling out in my local hospital. I don't know when I'm going to get it. I'm not exactly top priority, but sometime in the next few months, probably. So it's good news, but everybody still needs to stay safe, be smart over Christmas time. Christmas is not reason to go crazy and super spread everything. So stay safe. Congratulations to Australia for having 0 new cases. Combination of people listening, doing what they're told, and a more aggressive approach by the government has paid dividends for them. So enjoy yourselves, Australian 40K players. Have all the tournaments you want. People here holding 100 people tournament. I hear a 120 person tournament coming up. Somebody just asked for a token for a 100 person tournament in South Florida. I'm sorry. That's just ridiculous. And these people should not be encouraged. Anyway, so COVID carrying on. Congratulations to Joe Biden, formally now ratified as the president-elect, despite all of Trump's shenanigans, which are still ongoing, I think. But anyway, the rest of us have moved on. So tonight we have Custodes Tactica episode 44, which is the unit deep dive on the Sagittarium, and or SAGs as we like to call them. And sorry for using that short term, and some people don't understand what that refers to, but that's what it refers to. SAGs are the Sagittarium. It's kind of a weird name, just out of nowhere, almost like a zodiac term, whatever. But so we'll be talking all about SAGs tonight, Sagittarium. So before we change just a couple of things, so we announced on the Facebook page that the 9 o'clock live stream games are getting more difficult to pull off, and for myself and for my opponents. And we end up too late. It's like midnight, sometimes past midnight when we're finished, and people are tired. So we've decided to can the 9 p.m. live games for now. The shows are okay because they only take 45 minutes, an hour, or whatever. But the games take 2, 3, sometimes longer, and so it's a bit too late. So we're gonna try and move them to the Thursday 1 p.m. or 1:30 p.m. Dayhammer slot that we used last time with Phil. That works for both Phil and Francois, who are my only approved opponents right now. And we'll see how that goes. I used to take every Thursday afternoon off to go cycling, and that ain't a thing right now. So able to use that for Warhammer instead. And it seems to work well for people, and a lot of people just watch after the fact anyways, so it doesn't matter when we play. But also lets our European followers watch live as well. So we'll try that out and see how it goes. So Thursday afternoon will be the games. And so on that note, this Thursday Phil cannot make it. So in fact, we're going to move Francois' game with White Scars to this Thursday afternoon in 2 days. So this Thursday will still be on, but it will be White Scars instead of Phil and the Silent King. Next week is Christmas week. The schools are off. So I'm going to try and do a Dayhammer 21st, 22nd, or 23rd with the Silent King and Phil. We'll see how that goes schedule-wise. If daughter permitting, if we'll be able to do that live stream during the week. But and then we'll probably take the week off after that for Christmas, and then we'll be back in the new year. Of course, in the new year was usually charity hammer time. If you follow Best in Faction, obviously we're not doing a big charity hammer event this year, but Colin and those guys are still planning to stream a bunch of games with their own trusted little circle, and whatever they happen to make goes to charity. Obviously it won't be the big event that Charity Hammer was last year, but we are planning to maybe do one next summer or the fall to make up for it when people are safe to travel and things again, which quite frankly might be longer than next summer or fall, but we'll see how it goes. But the big Charity Hammer thing is not happening this year, but there will be some Charity Hammer stuff going on. So do follow Best in Faction. And I'm not sure that our channel will be involved in it this year because it's much, much smaller. But certainly we support Charity Hammer, and Best in Faction stream is mirrored on our Twitch when they're on and we're not on. So do check it out. Okay. I think those were all the announcements that we had. So probably what we're going to do now is get straight on to the deep dive. So deep dive will follow the same format as always. We'll be covering the Sagittarium. And so if you have questions and stuff, post it in chat or on the Discord, and we'll get to those afterwards. And okay, so we had actually passed the troop slot and gone on to elites, but I was really waiting for the Forge World rules to drop and then to double back and do the SAGs, which we are doing now. So let's just say in 8th, Sagittarium were not particularly impressive. Their shooting was not great. They took a lot of penalties to hit, and they weren't as hard to kill as Guardians. They were a little bit expensive too. And so as time goes on, their weapons have changed. 9th has changed things. Their points have come down to a comparable level. And also what we are trying to shoot at has changed. And now SAGs, I think, are finding a little bit of a renaissance right now. And I have had my SAGs for a long time, since they first came out, but never really played them until very recently. So, yes, and Chris points out they were heavy support, which doesn't matter as much maybe, but it does help that they're troops. So we're going to talk about these guys tonight. So first, as always, talking about role and keywords. So keywords wise, they are infantry, which is always good to be infantry these days. Interact well with terrain, tanglefoots, all that sort of stuff. They are core, as one would expect, being troop choice, so that's good as well going forward. There's a keyword for Sagittarium. Doesn't really do anything right now. There's no specific strats or rules for them, so that's just a placeholder keyword. And they are, of course, in the troop slot. As Chris pointed out, they were heavy support, which was silly, and now they are actually troop slot. And for a while, they were, along with Guardians, they were our only troop slots. Of course, now the Adricite and Pyrothite Guardians are just basic normal Guardians, but they're still really the only other troop slot other than basic Guardians. This has significance. Our whole army basically is OBSEC, so there's not really extra significance being troop in terms of OBSEC, but being troop now in 9th especially helps you fill patrols and battalions, so you don't have to pay CP for detachments. Now, being able to fill a battalion is nice because then you can run as many elites as you want basically without paying for Vanguard tax. So having a good troop without feeling like you're paying a tax to get a battalion can be helpful. And that's helped by the Guardian Storm Shield change, but also by the changes to the Sagittarium. So I think it's the best time we've ever had trying to run a double patrol or battalion right now, because we have actually things that are useful for our list and not just tax to fill those troop slots. So it's a big deal that they're troops. Now, you're able to take units of Sagittarium in anywhere from 3 to 5 models. Unfortunately, I feel like this is based mainly in the fact that you buy these guys in boxes of 5. And so therefore, you can run 3 to 5, as opposed to all the other Forge World units which come in boxes of 3s, so you can run those guys in 3 to 6. Venatari can go up to 6, Aquilon can go up to 6, but these guys come in boxes of 5, so you can only run them in units of 5, which is annoying because it'd be nice to have 6 of these guys, or have the option at least. Now, with the more recent rules, with Blood Games Vets and Blast and stuff, maybe you still run 5 instead of 6. Ultimately, it'd be nice if we could run these guys in a big unit of 10 just for funsies. But, so you're limited to 5 right now. And I would say, depending on how you use them, really will decide your unit size. I don't think there's necessarily a unit size that's the best. So it just kind of really depends on what you run. So model-wise, these are, of course, from Forge World. They are basically Guardian bodies with a spiky head. The helmet is different. It's got a spiky head. I quite like the helmet, actually. And some people have been using Sagittarium helmets for like Venatari and stuff like that. And of course, they just have this giant like bolter, basically. And that's it. All the poses are pretty similar. They're all just standing there holding the gun with two hands. They're pretty boring models, and actually Forge World could have done a little bit better. Same with Aquilon, to be honest. But, they're a bit boring. They're just dudes standing there holding their guns, and it is what it is. But no little plume or anything, so it's kind of cool, nice and clean, very easy to paint these guys. And so it is what it is. Now, they're $100 Canadian for 5, which is expensive, Forge World, but actually less expensive than, say, Aquilon, who are $200 for 6, or Venatari, who are like $160 for 6. And our tanks are off the charts. Speaking of that, slight detour. So I was at Red Dragon the other day, and somebody handed in a Custodes army, and I looked at it, and I bought 5 more Aquilons, unpainted, apparently a real Forge World, and a half-painted Coronis grav tank. Spur of the moment buy. I don't have a Coronis. I don't think I'm going to use one, but I don't have one. So I'm like, I'll just buy one. And then Aquilon to put, to make a set of Adrathic Aquilon, because, I still got these little guns here. So I'm like, that's cool. And then, $300-something later, the minute I left the store, buyer's remorse. Dan was nice enough to let me take it back and not suffer the remorse. So I didn't buy those things, but, saving up for carbon wheels for my bike. So don't really need more Aquilon and a Coronis grav tank. Anyway, back to these guys. So $100 for 5 of them is a Forge World deal. There you go. And I think they also have trouble keeping these guys in stock. Maybe more so now than they used to be. Okay. So on to stats. So their stats are basically basic custodian stat line. They have the lower leadership of 8 as they're the troop guys. Standard 2-up armor, 4-up invuln. Obviously, if you're comparing these guys, and we will be drawing comparisons to custodian guards since they are both troops, although they are really not the same unit. Same type of unit, so be careful with those comparisons, but because they're troops, there's some leeway for comparison there. But they're obviously not as tough as Custodian Guard, who have basically 1-up armor and 3-up invuln. But 2-up, 4-up standard Custodian toughness is still pretty good for a unit that doesn't often get attacked very often. So that's their basic stats. And in terms of rules, so they don't have any other rules or specific abilities. Obviously, they're OBSEC, but that's about it. That's pretty easy. Okay, shooting. So the gun that they have, whatever it's called, I can't even remember what it's called. Bolt Caliver or something. Bolt Caliver. Adrastus Bolt Caliver. Anyway, so it used to be, if I remember correctly, so it's 36, it's a combi weapon basically, and it's a combination of what used to be an Assault 3 heavy bolter, so Strength 5 -1, 1 damage, plus an Assault 1 Adrathic weapon basically. Now in the old days, and it's 36-inch range for the heavy bolters, pretty standard, and half range, so only 15-inch range for the Adrathic, so it's pretty short range in the old days. And so if you shoot both of them and you have to shoot both of them at the same target, you get a -1 to hit. Now in the old days, these guys hit on 2s, but then -1 for shooting both profiles, -1 if you're going to advance and shoot because they're assault weapons, if you're shooting at a flyer. So these guys were really -1 out of contention because of different sources of -1. That, of course, is now changed. You can only have one -1. They don't accumulate. So now you can basically advance and shoot both profiles at anything and still only suffer -1 to hit. So that automatically makes it better. The second thing is the Adrathic used to do a mortal wound if you rolled a 1. And all the Adrathic weapons used to do that, and that was super sucky, and they changed that, so that's great. So you don't kill yourself anymore by shooting the Adrathic profile. And then without the Adrathic profile, why would you pay 50 points for a dude with a heavy bolter? It's like useless. So that was another thing. So now basically though, you have a guy with the new buffs shooting Assault 3, Heavy Bolter, so 5, Strength 5, -1, 2 damage a pop, and then an additional 1 shot at Strength 5, -3, flat 3 damage. So now you have a single guy who could do 9 damage to you. One guy. That's pretty good. And that is up from just doing a possible 6 damage. So it's a lot better, obviously. And then only maximum -1 to hit. And then they become kind of pseudo-mobile because they can move and advance and still shoot. And if you have Trajan around, that really takes away some of the -1 kind of feel to it. So actually these guys end up kicking out quite a lot of shots. When I used to play them before 9th came out, even a unit of 5 guys, very unimpressed with their output. But I've now been quite impressed with their output since the new Forger rules. So it's been pretty good. And so that damage buff to 2 damage on the bolt volley profile is obviously really good. And the fact that they cap at -1 to hit is really good. The fact that they basically move 6 plus d6 and still just a small penalty, still quite good. Even these 3 guys are putting out 9 of those bolt volley shots and 3 Adrathic shots, which is pretty sweet. And if you have 5 of these guys, now you're putting out 15 2 damage heavy bolter shots and 5 3 damage Adrathic shots. That's pretty good shooting. These guys, even against T7, T8, because it's strength 5, will give you ping some wounds. These guys are really good for pinging the last 2 to 4 to 5 wounds off of like a vehicle or something, because they have decent volume and big damage and good AP. So they're actually very useful for that as well. Definitely good for picking off little vehicles. So really quite impressive now with their shooting. Traditionally, the 36-inch range is nice because you're able to stand at the back and still interact with a lot of the table. The 15-inch was a real limiter, and if you're not using the Adrathic shot, you're kind of not getting the full value out of their shooting. So 15-inch was a bit of a bummer. That's a little bit mitigated now, first of all, because they can move and advance and still shoot without making themselves that much worse. Second of all, the tables are smaller, and so 15-inch is getting to like proper medium range. And the objectives are also more kind of, on many missions, more concentric towards the middle, and so they're more in position to shoot better. So I've really had no problems getting the 15-inch in range in the games that I've used them. So it's less of a problem than it used to be to have the 15-inch range. The final factor which kind of brings their shooting into focus right now is everything's getting 2 wounds. Plague Marines, 2 wounds. Your average normal Marine, 2 wounds. Everything else that's tougher than that, 3 wounds. And it is getting a lot of wound bloat out there. And so if this was still 1 damage, it would be really, really shitty. But the fact that it's 2 damage now and the other shots are 3 damage makes these guys really quite good as a response to what the meta is doing right now. And in an age now where we're going to see Plague Marines with 2 wounds, and they still got all their Terminators with 3 wounds, but they've lost their Feel No Pain. Now 2 damage, 3 damage is going to come in handy. And with the -1 damage, I mean, the Bolt Volley kind of sucks a little bit now, but the Adrathic is still there for 2 damage. So I feel like we're going to have to be stacking a lot of Adrathic weapons if we get a lot of Death Guard in the meta. And so this is another source of Adrathic weapons for relatively cheap. Because really, other than Adrathic, don't have a lot of other flat damage shooting like that we can get cheaply. All right. The other shooting comparator, obviously, is Guardians with Adrosite Spears, which is basically Guardians with 18-inch one-shot Adrathic shooting, which really is quite unimpressive. For 2 points more than a Sagittarium, you get 3 extra range, but you get 1 shot. And so these guys have that 1 shot at almost the same range, are cheaper, and they have the bolt caliber shots, the bolt volley shots. So literally, I mean, there was really no reason to take Adrocite Spear Guardians anyway, and now there literally is no reason to do it. So another unit relegated to the shelf if you have those. Okay, so that's basically Sagittarium shooting. Their shooting has just improved over time. The game and the missions have changed that makes their shooting useful for us. The meta and what we're trying to shoot at has changed to make their shooting something that we need. And they have gotten to a price point where it is not unreasonable to take them. So I think they're in a pretty decent spot right now in giving us some firepower that we sorely lack. Okay. So melee-wise, I mean, these guys are not melee powerhouses. They have base 3 attacks, but they have no weapon standard. So if you don't give them Misericordia, they're just slapping people at strength 5, 0 AP, 1 damage. That's not going to kill anyone except maybe guardsmen or gaunts. So not great, but if you spend the 3 points to give Misericordia, at least maybe a couple in a unit, but in my latest list, I give them all Misericordia. Now they're each 4 attacks each, and they're all hitting strength 5, -2, 1 damage, which is a very nice attack profile for that kind of, for the things that they are likely to be fighting. Like, you don't send these guys in to like try and kill Blight Lord Terminators. You send these guys in to try and, wipe out guardsmen, or like, the cheeky little unit that's infiltrating to try and like take the backfield objective off them. Like, they're really good at killing those things. I was pleasantly surprised in my game against Phil how good 3 guys, 12 attacks, strength 5, -2, 1 damage was at killing warriors. Very good. And so that -2 is really nice to get through these guys who have like 4 up, 5 up save. 1 damage is usually all you need, and they were really good for that. So I think Misericordia, I think you have to have at least 1 Misericordia in your unit, if not 2. If you have a unit of 3, maybe 1 is good enough. If you have more than 3 guys, I think you need at least 2 Misericordia. If you have the spare points, which we often do in lists to throw around Misericordias, put them on your Sags. If you'll regret it if you get like 10 boys just bogging down your Sagittarium in the back, holding that objective the whole time, and you can't get rid of them because you're AP 0, 1 damage. You just regret it. Just use the points. It's very little points. Put them on the Sags. I think it's almost mandatory to put at least 1 or 2 Misericordia on a unit of Sags. So yeah. So the combat, they will do what they need to do. Obviously, their combat is not as good as Guardians, either with spears or with swords. That's not their role. And that's just not what they're there to do. But it is good enough for what they need to do if you sprinkle a few daggers in there. All right. Not much more to say about their melee. Okay, so points. So each Sag is 50 points. You add the Miz, that takes them up to 53 points. Let's just play them as 53 points for now. I think that's an okay price point. I've already said in our Guardian deep dive that I feel like our basic troops are still too expensive, especially now with the closing gap between Marines, 2 and 3 wound troops, and us being that much more in points, but not much more in terms of toughness, or not any in toughness. And so that gap needs to close a little bit. Either Marines come up or we go down. Ideally, we go down. And so at 50 or 53 points, I feel like the Sags are, just like the Guardians, a little bit too much. But I think in the context of our own faction, their points cost is okay, 50 points. They are... Guardians with spears are 4 points cheaper, but more commonly people are running sword and board Guardians these days, and they are 3 points more. So Sag, you pay 3 points more for that extra durability, but the Sags put out a lot more shooting. As I already mentioned, the Guard with the Adrocite spears are 55 points each. I would never take those guys. And but really, otherwise, a unit of Guardians and a unit of Sagittarium are pretty comparable points wise. So really, you just got to decide in your troop slots: do you want a unit to sit there and just survive and maybe be able to fight better in combat, or do you want a unit that will probably survive and put out a lot of shooting? And I think that's where people are really starting to look at Sags these days, because they do basically what the Guardians do in terms of just sitting in the back and doing nothing, but they do more. And whereas people were paying points before for Guardians to just kind of sit there and do nothing, which is unfortunate, but that's what we had to do. So I feel like they're still a little bit overpriced like the Guardians, but in the context of our book, they're okay. Okay. Comparables. So, everything is comparable to a T5 3-wound Custodian now. All the Marine stuff, for example. So we don't have to go through all those again. But I think we still compare poorly to those things, as I already mentioned. But if you take what you're getting is actually way better than any of those units right now in the troop slot. So I guess you could compare them almost directly to heavy intercessors. They're more expensive, obviously, but they hit on 2-ups. With the -1, of course, they basically hit on 3-ups, so that's the same. They have better combat output, hitting on 2s with the Misericordia. They shoot more than heavy intercessors for sure, and they have 4-up embalm and 2-up armor. So they are better than heavy intercessors, but at a points cost for some little buffs. I think as a backfield troop unit, they're actually maybe one of the most shooty in the game right now. But you do pay for that, but for what you're paying for, you get a backfield troop unit that is going to shoot a lot. And so I think that's good. And there's not a lot of things to compare that other armies have to compare to that. So that's a little bit of a niche that the Sags have for us. Okay. Stratagems. So there are no specific Sagittarium stratagems, which is a shame. You could think of things you could do like moving, advancing, and shooting without penalty. You could think about being able to shoot in combat. Overwatching. Like you could give a strat to Sagittarium that would not be overpowered, but would make them have some utility for sure. But maybe in the new book, the some strats that come to mind that would be good on Sags, and maybe some that you've never thought of using on them before, hopefully. So number 1, Emperor's Hand. So this is obviously an interesting combo. Emperor's Hand removes your modifiers. So basically for 1 CP, your unit of Sags now can move, advance, shoot both profiles with no penalty, and ignore cover. That's pretty good for 1 CP. You need to kill something, or you need to put some damage down on a vehicle or something. That's a pretty handy thing. You got Trajan nearby. You're going to be doing okay. So that's an interesting use for Emperor's Hand if you're running that shield host. So deep striking and Morades, that's an interesting way of using Sags. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Unflinching. So unflinching is the Overwatch strat, lets you Overwatch on 5s. Now, that's pretty interesting, I think, in very specific circumstances, i.e. trying to put wounds on these guys that have wound limits. So Satan, Gazi, these kind of guys. I'm thinking specifically in the Satan matchup. If you charge, so unfortunately it's going to cost you 2 CP. 1 CP to Overwatch and 1 CP to Overwatch on a 5. But then a unit of 5 guys, 15 shots, and 5 Adrathic shots, and you're going to be doing min 2 to 3 damage, so you'll get through that 3 damage you need to get in that phase. That could swing the game in that Satan matchup, as I've already discovered playing Phil, and if people have talked about already, we're trying to figure out ways of getting an extra 3 wounds on the Satan other than in the shooting and the combat phase, and that's it. Overwatch is one of those phases that we have without having to bring a Psyker or anything like that. So, I think when he charged my Aquilon, I put 1 wound or 2 wounds on him, which was significant because I think I only ended up killing him by like 1 or 2 wounds. So that could be significant because if you don't kill that Satan that turn, he then wrecks another unit, and then that could be game for you. So I know it's 2 CP, but 2 CP is 2 CP if it's going to help get rid of that only thing that really threatens your army. And those warriors weren't doing anything, right? So, like, I think you should think about that if you are in the position of playing against, let's just put it out there, the Satan matchup, okay? Because we're constantly trying to think of ways we can get 3 extra wounds on a Satan outside of shooting and melee. There it is. It's going to cost you 2 CP, but yeah. The other thing to note, of course, is that 36-inch range, the Satan cannot hide with character protection. So these guys are pretty good at pinging wounds too, long before the Satan gets close to you. So you could consider that too. So I actually have a couple of ways of using Sags nicely in the Satan matchup. Now, I didn't do that against Phil, mostly because I forgot that I could shoot it, but I could have pinged off some wounds early on with the Sagittarium. Of course, it just heals, which is annoying, but, you know, it is what it is. But, so there we go. Okay, Tanglefoot, of course, infantry, Tanglefoot, 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 Tanglefoot. Okay, so the next stratagem is Ever Vigilant, which is our interceptor strat. So basically, if somebody deep strikes or comes on the table from reinforcements within 12 inches of your infantry, which they are, they can shoot. And this is really, really interesting. Now, first, it's 2 CP, so that's a lot. Hopefully it goes down to 1 and it gets changed like the Marines get changed. But for now, it's 2 CP. But you should remember this. How many times these guys are usually standing at the back or midfield on an objective? Do you get people infiltrating, coming in to get scramblers, to get your opponent's key midfield or your zone scrambler or something like that within 12? And then there's usually something really shitty that you could easily kill. And then you just pop CP and kill it. Now, is it worth 2 CP to stop scramblers? Because if you don't get all of them, that's 10 points gone. I think it definitely is. And so these guys could easily take care of that. And guess what? -1 hit penalty, no problem. I got -1 anyway for shooting both profiles. No big deal. So I think Ever Vigilant is a great strat to think about with these guys, as they're usually hitting in your backfield, watching out for deep strikers. So that's pretty cool. So don't forget Ever Vigilant strat. It's not really super worthwhile to use on any of our other units anyway at 2 CP, but these guys could really put the hurt on deep striking things for 2 CP. So think about it. Think about where the game is at that moment. How key is it? So if I'd had a unit of Sags at the back in my game against Phil when he popped in those 2 Crypto Thralls to get his Scramblers, I could have Ever Vigilant those guys, wiped them off super easily, and boom, no more Scramblers. Sorry, that's 10 points down. You have to remember that most people don't even realize we have an interceptor strat as well. So yeah, and I know Marines have it, and I always forget about it. So you really gotta, keep it in your level 1 consciousness there. Okay, and you can plan for that because you know the guy picked scramblers. You know what's gone into deep strike to get them scramblers, so you can totally plan for that. And they know that they have to get it, and you know that you're ready for it, right? So, and you don't even have to then block them from coming in. You can bait them by being outside of 9 but inside of 12 of the board edge. Then you're basically covered, right? So there you go. Okay. Wisdom of the Ancients. So don't forget, people often have a little dreadnought hanging at the back, a Telemon with the guns or whatever, that it basically turns your dread into a shield captain reroll. So that can be helpful for these guys, especially if your characters have moved up. So don't forget that strat. It's a very nice strat to pop. Obviously, if you need to protect them and they're getting attacked, transhuman, grim responsibility, these can help keep your Sags alive. Blood Game Veterans. So obviously, Blood Game Veterans can be used on these guys. And for a CP, it could be clutch. If you're shooting at something, I think you use this if you're trying to kill something that's tougher than you. So when you're wounding on 5s. Because then you're fishing for 5s and 6s. 6s to hit are auto wounds. And you're putting decent AP big damage auto wound shots, making them make those saves. So I think a CP for Blood Game Veterans for these guys in the right circumstance, depending on what you're shooting, could be very good use of a CP. So let's say you got like a tank commander, you need to get like 4 more wounds off of it in the shooting phase. Pop a Blood Game Vets on these guys, and that could be a CP well spent. Okay. So lists. So right now, I'm seeing SAGs obviously as troop slots and patrols and battalions. People trying to run double patrols, single patrols, battalions. I'm seeing a lot of SAGs in those lists as troop slots. Either all SAGs, so like my list, I got 3x3 SAGs, or like 1 Guardian unit and 1 SAG unit, or any combination of Guardians and SAGs. And I think that works great. You get 1 unit that's more shooty, moves up. You get another unit just kind of sits. I've toyed with a list where I had a max 5 SAG unit and then a max like 7 shield unit to just sit right in the middle of the board and be annoying, and having the SAGs behind it shooting. That's an interesting list idea I've been toying around with, but obviously as the 2 troops, you're trying to fill out your patrols and battalions, so that's where you're going to see these guys in the lists, just as filling those slots. I think 3x3 SAG actually works very well. I was super impressed with it last game. Those little units of 3 certainly put in a lot of work, and if you need to, they can shoot at the same target. And so in total, you have 9 SAGs. So I think that works quite well if you just want to pay a minimum for a battalion, but still have those 3 units do something. I really like that idea. But if you want a bigger SAG unit, 4 or 5 guys with more shooting, then that's also good to like fill out a patrol or something like that. So certainly, if you run like 5 SAGs as your only troop unit in a patrol and don't run Guardians at all, I think that's perfectly acceptable. I think these 2 units are very different in what you're trying to do with that unit, and so you can't really directly compare them. It just depends on what else is in your list and what you want them to do. I think it's really compelling. The shooting they put out is really compelling versus just having a unit that, granted, is very hard to kill but doesn't really do anything. It kind of depends a little bit on your play style too and the armies that you're playing against, but the shooting they put out is really quite compelling. So in terms of play styles, like that's what we're dealing with, right? So generally, how you're seeing SAGs is you're seeing them in the backfield or midfield. So starting off at the back, moving forwards. Obviously, they're infantry. They can do your first scramblers. They can raise banners. Then they can move forward, advance, and still shoot. So they can be a forward-moving kind of little like gun line. And they're pretty good at that role. Even standing at the back, you may not get as many 15-inch shots out, but you're definitely getting your bolt caliber shots out. I feel like if you're not moving up a little bit, you need to be getting those 15-inch Adrathic shots off as well for full value from these guys, I feel like. So having them way at the back is probably not the best. Something like some girls at the back or even a unit of guards might be better right at the back, and then the SAGs moving up to midfield. And I feel like their shooting really closes down a lot of shooting lanes, and as you saw on my game against Phil, I even used it as a screen for my Terminator so that they attack the SAGs. Because if I lose some SAGs, I don't actually mind it that much. So I can sometimes even use them as screen. And then, of course, as sources of Tanglefoot and stuff, they can be quite nice as screen. So I think this is the typical way we're seeing SAGs played these days. Of course, we're seeing a lot more SAGs played now than we used to. So there may be new ways of playing that we haven't discovered. The possibility of using them as a shooting hammer is interesting. Of course, the hammer only goes to five guys. So while it's good shooting, it's not like a death ball unit that you just drop down is going to kill whatever. But you could try that. You could put them into deep strike or spend unfortunately, it's like 2 CP to put a unit of 5 guys in infiltrates. That's probably not worth it. But you just drop them in and then they do a bunch of shooting. I don't really feel like they need to do that because they get the -1 for shooting both profiles anyway, so you might as well start them on the table, move in advance, and then you have options about where to go. So I don't feel like deep striking them as a hammer is really that useful, and where you could just start them on the table. Another interesting way I thought about using them is as MSU, so unit 3 guys. that is a CP to put into deep strike, dropping down with an Alaris captain in your opponent's backfield, the same way people that are using 3 guardians to try and get, line breaker and all those kind of things. I think that's interesting. They also put out a decent amount of shooting with a captain right there, and they're pretty cheap. You do have to spend a CP though to put them into space and small bases, and so that's an interesting idea. The problem with that though is that for a couple of points more, 3 Venatari is kind of better. I mean, their shooting may not be quite as compelling, but they fight better, they definitely move better, and they native do strike and save you a CP. So I feel like if you're looking for something to come down with a shield captain in their opponent's backfield, probably 3 Venatari is better than 3 Sagittarum. That's an interesting idea. In fact, Venatari being only 2 points more than Sagittarum makes the Sagittarum kind of stuck in the role of backfield, midfield, shooting support. Because anytime you need them to be more aggressive than that, you might as well just have Venatari. So you have to pay for these guys anyway, for patrols, battalions. So just, I think that's probably still the best way to use them, and that's their niche, is to sit and exist and shoot. If you're going to try and use them in other weird, aggressive ways, I just think Venatari for a couple points more are just better in those roles. But that's okay, because quite frankly, they're good at that role, and why make them do something that they're not good at? So I think that their role in the army is secure for now, and for as long as 2 and 3 wound things in the meta are a big deal. So that's how you're probably going to see them. That's probably how I'll continue to play them, at least for now. They were very impressive last game, I gotta say, very impressive. Okay. So that's basically the deep dive on the Sags. It didn't seem as deep as the other ones, maybe a couple of tidbits there, but they're a pretty obvious unit in terms of what they do. Just the few keys, I think, is that, try and move them up to like mid-board. That's where they're going to be most effective. I feel like you always want to be shooting both profiles and have a captain or Trajan nearby to get the most out of your 50 points for these guys. I feel like just shooting the 36-inch range gun from the back and just ignoring the Adrathic, you're not going to find it as impressive. Okay. So post your questions on the chat, guys. We'll go to the Discord as well. Let's see. Sorry, I haven't been keeping up on the chat. What's up, Jason C? Red Viper, he likes the Sag Guard. Yes. Andrew Bolker, hello. Really like your Tactical and Terminators. Learning a lot about Custodes. All right. Thanks for watching, Andrew, and welcome to the fold. Don't forget to join our Discord, Andrew, if you really want to learn more about Custodes. Lots of good players there talking all about Custodes in a friendly, non-trolly environment. And Mr. Funktastic is in the chat as well. All right. I'm going to go to the Discord. If you got questions, please add it up. All right. Where's the Discord? Okay. Sag Golden Carpet. Viable. I assume that means running 3 units of 5 Sagittarum. I mean, that's viable. So that's what? So let's say 250-ish points for unit of 5. So that's 750, 900 points for 15 Sags. I mean, sure. I mean, it doesn't leave you a lot of points for other things, but that would be interesting. I only have 10 Sagittarium. I'm never going to run more than 10, but that would be something interesting to try. I think that's better than running 3 5-man Guardian units. I think having 1 Guardian unit and the rest Sags is a nice balance, because then you got 1 unit that's hard to kill that you can go sit on something, and then the other units are more offensive. So, but all Sags, I mean, sure. Like with all these things, there's often diminishing returns, but I feel like with all the 2 wound, 3 wound meta we're facing, that maybe that might be something we need to do. In any case, I feel like people, if they're serious about facing this meta, they need to go get Sags if they don't have them already. I would say 5 to 10. In what matchups do Sags suffer the most? Well, I mean, that's hard to say because actually they have good shooting for almost all things. Even if you're just shooting at a unit of guardsmen, that's 15, 20 shots from 5 guys. Or 3 guys is still putting out 9, 12 shots, right? That are all going to kill guardsmen. So I think they're very versatile in what they can shoot. And as I said, they can also shoot vehicles, right? So that kind of gun is actually pretty versatile. And in terms of bad matchup, I mean, just matchups where they're going to die. So like a Manticore takes these guys out pretty easily. Basilisks, right? So sometimes you can't just let them sitting at the back. But if they're shooting your Sags and not shooting your other stuff, which is more likely going to kill their stuff. So it's like I said, sometimes I use my Sags as screens, because you just put them out there and they're your kind of cheapest people. So, so I don't know if there's really good or bad matchups. I just think their weapon is very useful in almost all cases, and they're fairly tough like normal custodians. Okay. Should you ever put them in a transport to get them close for the beam? I don't really feel like you need to. Because they walk 6, you move D6 and you can still shoot. And with the smaller tables, I don't feel like you need a transport to get them where you need them to go at all. So definitely not. How the recommended unit size. So I think we talked about this already. Sagittarium, is Misericordia a must take? So as I already mentioned, I think you need to take at least 1 or 2 in a unit. If you have the points, which you often will at the end of a list building exercise, just throw them on your Sags. So in my latest list, I had enough points for 9 Misericordia on my 9 Sags and 10 Misericordias on my 2 units of Venatari, and those really made a big difference over the course of that game. Now, specifically, I was just trying to mow through warriors, so for sure that helped just to have more attacks, but I feel like that's a good use of, 927, 27 plus 10, 3, like 50 points, which would have got me like 1 extra Sag maybe, as opposed to a bunch of extra attacks. So I think it was definitely useful. It's almost like buying a banner, almost. Okay, how much to invest into Sagittarium? If you mean invest as in money, like I say, 5 to 10. If you mean investing points, I mean, again, it just depends on what you want them to do, and we already discussed that. Is it worth magnetizing guard as Sags? Well, that's a good question. So, the 2 units basically share the same body. Okay, the heads are different, but that doesn't really matter. The shoulders are the same. And so really it's just the arms and the weapon specifically. So they would be very amenable to magnetizing. Now, I'm not the kind of guy, I would rather just go out and have the separate models and not have to bother with all that. But if you're into magnetizing and you want to save money, you definitely could. I believe you can just buy the guns. I'm not sure, like the gun arms. Or you could just take like freaking heavy bolters. I mean, they're not very different from heavy bolters. They just got a little Aquila on them. They're otherwise pretty much heavy bolters. So I mean, you could get third-party ones that look like that, so it doesn't really matter. So you could easily actually just magnetize, like, guys to become Sagittarium, for sure. You could easily do that. How viable is a replacement for Shield Guardians for midfield? I think, as we already discussed, is super viable. Shield Guardians standing in the midfield is fine. They're probably not going to die very easily. But these guys will not die almost as hard and will put out a lot of shooting from the midfield, and you can't really hide around the board from that. So I think they're good in that role. Is it worth overwatching? Well, we already talked about that. With 5 set to defend. What's set to defend? Is that the set to defend is the bonus you get, I think, for being in dense cover or something. If you get charged, you get like +1 to hit in combat or something like that. I don't know. They already hit on 2, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, just tell us Sag are better than heavy intercessors. I feel like they are competitive with heavy intercessors. They're obviously more expensive, but they're harder to kill. They shoot more. So I think they're our heavy intercessor basically. So yeah. Andrew Boker, they are four-drilled, yes. The gun arms and heads are the upgrade kit. Yeah, so you can get upgrades. You could just buy the heads. Some people use their heads for all their Custodes, and you could just buy the gun arms. So definitely buying a box of Guardians and then magnetizing with the gun arm kits, that might end up costing you the same as just buying the Sags. But if you already got Guardians and you want to magnetize, then that's viable. Ever Vigilant, worth using. So we talked about that already. All right. What would Custodes get the Emperor for Sanguinius Day? No idea. Maybe a new body. Maybe a Sagittarium body. How many points would you pay for a Sag before you stop taking them? I think where they are now. I don't think I'd pay 55 for them, plus the 3 for Misericordia. I mean, that starts to become more expensive. But I think they're at, as I said, an okay price point right now. Considerations for when to take Sag over Shield Guard. Yep, so we already talked about that. And does it depend on CP? I don't think it depends on CP because I don't really use a lot of CP. Maybe the occasional blood games or something, but they're not one of the targets we use CP on generally. So, okay, guys. So that is the Sagittarium deep dive. Thank you for watching. Join us Thursday afternoon for a game against White Scars. That's going to be pretty hard hitting. Backs against a wall on that one. It's going to be a good game. And that's on Thursday afternoon. And thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe, follow, join the Discord, support us on Patreon. Thank you very much to Dan and Dylan, Red Dragon, our main sponsors. And everybody stay safe. And I will see you guys Thursday afternoon.